Okay, so that's me here in the front. So just basically, we're going to talk about some basic things because people talk about how does cannabis affect government and what all comes with that and how a bill becomes a law. This is all very important because we can't talk about wanting to expand cannabis and getting more Black men particularly involved with it unless we know what actually has to happen for this to occur. So we're going to talk about how a bill becomes a law. We're also going to talk about actually researching a bill. Where is it at? How to look at where is that in committee. And we're going to look at some bills that I've introduced that have to do with cannabis and also about the hemp industry and about potentially having a lobby day. So I won't hold you guys too long because sometimes this can be boring and unboring at the same time. So the first thing is that how does a bill become a law? It's always a big question to ask. The first thing you have to understand is that we have these wonderful lawyers. It's probably about 40 of them, and they're called our legislative service commissions. They're a group of lawyers that basically all they do is they write the bill. So if I say, hey, I want to make the sky blue, they will legally, in legal terms, write it out to make it a bill that's legal, that actually makes sense legally. I'm not a lawyer by trade, and most of my colleagues at the State House are not lawyers, because that's also another question I get from a lot of people. Hey, you're not a lawyer. How can you make laws? It's because we have this wonderful staff of nonpartisan people that actually write the bills itself, and we will actually give them the idea and what the bill should be including, and they will actually expand it to make sure that it's legal within itself. So they're called LSC. If you have a bill idea, you can almost go to almost any legislator, no matter if they're in the Senate or in the House, and say, hey, can you go to LSC and have them draft this bill for me? Most of us who, if we're a decent person, we will have no issues drafting that for you. So after it's draft, and is what part of it that was not included on here, we would normally have interest party meetings. Interest party meetings are so important because during an interest party meeting, you will take it to everyone in theory that will be affected by that. So if you're talking about cannabis, you would take it to patients, you would take it to distributors and producers and manufacturers. You also take it to people who are on possibly the medical cannabis board and get people's input so we can make sure that when the bill actually is introduced in committee, there is as little feedback or pushback as possible. Once you get done with the actual interest party meeting is when you actually introduce the bill to the State House. We have this clerk's office, and that's when they actually put a bill number on it. It goes from being like just a draft to an actual bill. So a bill is actually when you have actual number assigned to the bill. Here in the state of Ohio, we have about 700 bills that have been introduced since this General Assembly started. Our General Assemblies always start in January of the odd year. So we're about to be at the end of our General Assembly right now. So after it's been introduced, you will actually go and have it introduced into a committee. So one of the bills that we're going to discuss with mine has been introduced to the Health Committee. And so when you're looking at a bill, it would be introduced. The chairman would decide when they want the bill for the first hearing, which is always the sponsor testimony. And the sponsor testimony is literally the committee hearing where the legislator, it could be a representative or a senator, depending on what chamber the person's in, actually has a committee hearing. This committee hearing is just for them. No one else gets to normally come speak at it except for the legislator. And then we will have proponent and opponent testimony. If you're lucky, you will have a chairperson that will allow you to have the sponsor testimony as well as a proponent and the opponent testimony all at one time. But if you have a more traditional chairperson, which we have a lot of traditional conservative chairs at the State House, they will make you have at least three hearings, where one will be the sponsor testimony, which is just the legislator. And then the second one would be the proponent, which is people who are in agreement with the bill. And then you have the third one would be opponent, which are people who are against the bill. You cannot control who comes and speaks on behalf because the state house is the people's house. So almost anybody could come, but normally as a representative, we normally like to try to make sure we are controlling the situation by bringing as many people for proponent testimony and controlling who does not come with opponent testimony. So after a bill actually gets voted out of the committee, then it goes for a floor vote in that chamber. So during that time period, me being a representative, I have to almost kind of go whip the votes. I have to go talk to as many legislators as possible and try to convince them to vote for this bill. This is why bills take so long, because there are 99 of us in the House. And if anybody tried to do any type of family project, even if you have 3 or 4 people in your family, you know it's a lot to make a decision. So imagine trying to do that with 99 people who are from all different parts of the state of Ohio. So for instance, I just had a bill that became a law earlier this year. It took almost 6 months for this bill to become a law, which is considered a short time frame. I have colleagues who have bills that have been in circulation for years and they still have not become a law because of the process of just trying to convince people that your bill is some bill that they want to vote on. So once the bill is passed out of one chamber, particularly the chamber that I'm in, which is the House, then it moves over to the Senate to repeat this whole process over again. And sometimes that part becomes very tedious, but normally if it's passed in one chamber, unless there is some bureaucracy where somebody doesn't like someone, which is the honest truth, your bill normally will pass without drama. But if you have some drama, they will stop your bill because people are petty at the state House. So once it's passed out of both chambers, the House and the Senate, then it actually gets signed into law by the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. And then last but not least, you have it signed into law by the Governor, which is the most important part because that's when the bill actually becomes a law. We stop saying bill, blah, blah, blah. We say, hey, it's this law. And then it becomes part of the Ohio Revised Code. So, and if you're wondering like, hey, I'm not trying to make a bill into law, there's a bill that I'm looking into. This is where we get into the legislative research. It's really easy to figure out how you can actually find out about a bill. You go to ohiohouse.gov, and this is the same website that we all use. Like there's no like secret website that us legislators use. People always think that we have like some secret website of information. We use the same website that the public uses. So once you go to ohiohouse.gov, there is a tab right here at the top, right here, called legislation. Once you click on that, you will actually go and see a legislation tab where you will see a search engine. You can actually put the bill number in there, but if you can't remember it, like if you're looking for cannabis, you can just put the word cannabis in there and it will literally pull up anything from this General Assembly or any past General Assemblies that has to do with cannabis. So again, for those, because I know I'm really good with repetition, when you go to ohiohouse.gov, you click on the icon at the top, the tab at the top, it says legislation. It will give you a search bar, and then you will click on that area by putting in a bill number or a word that's associated with the bill that you are looking for. So even if a bill has become a law, you actually will see it there too, and you can look at the whole process of where it's been and all of this information. You can find the contact information for the legislator if you want to get in contact with that person. You can see where it is in committee. You can actually look at the testimony and read the testimony because everyone has to turn in written testimony. And you can also allow yourself to see who's all on the committee, which is very important. So part of your research too is knowing who the players are, knowing who the chairperson is, learning people's tendencies to do certain things. So when I see a bill is like the cannabis bill that I introduced is in the health committee with Rep. Lips, my first thought process is, hey, I need to go talk to Chairman Lips about my bill, and I also need to go talk to the speaker. People, even like yourself, can go advocate for a bill or, say you don't like a bill by going to talk to the chairman. because the chairman is the one who will determine if a bill actually even has a hearing in a timely manner or not. So if you're just trying to find an actual legislator like myself, you will still be on the same website, ohiohouse.gov. This is the same website, like I said before, that even myself has to look up information for my colleagues. There's no separate websites. I don't know why, but we would go to ohiohouse.gov and you could click on the tab representatives, and you could click it by region. You can click it by house district. You can actually find us by our last names, or you can even go to the front page of the ohiohouse.gov and look us up right here in this section where my mouse is. You see a tab right there, a pull down section for representatives and for districts. So that's always the easiest way to try to find us that way. Always just way easier. So to the good part, cannabis and hemp at the state legislature. So we have House Bill 614, which is a bill that I introduced earlier this year. This bill was actually inspired by a mom that I met. Her name is Tiffany. And I'm actually going to say her name because sometimes people don't always get credit for what they are doing and what inspiration they are for us legislators. She has a son, and she contacted my office just saying, like, you know, Rep, I really like living in Ohio, but I need to make sure my son has access to cannabis, and this is becoming a barrier for the quality of life for my son. So we had talked, I think maybe like 2 or 3 times. We talked about the idea of allowing more people for the for medical cannabis. And you notice I use the word cannabis and not marijuana, but for authorizing more people to be able to use medical cannabis for the autism spectrum, and just coming up with a better process of how we can add more conditions to this. If anybody's dealt with cannabis, you know that our medical cannabis board has been very difficult to work with when it comes to adding different disorders to allow more people to be able to utilize it. So at this point, they've said that the only way that they're going to change something is to put it back here on us legislators. So that means that we have to introduce a bill, like I did, to actually open up the process so more people can be able to access medical cannabis. So that's House Bill 614. And I'm going to revert back to the previous slides that if you want to look at the bill and the full bill itself, which is not a long bill, it's like 30 pages. It's a good, easy read. You can go to ohiohouse.gov and click on the tab that says legislation, and you can just put in the number 614. If you put in the number 614, you will see the whole bill, and you will see what the progress of this bill has been. So far, I've not received a hearing for this bill at all. I'm not really surprised because people are just very, we deal with a lot of conservative colleagues at the State House, but I will be reintroducing this bill in the next General Assembly, which starts in January 2021, because it's very necessary that as a state of Ohio, we figure out a process to be able to add more qualifying medical conditions for medical cannabis here within the state. So this picture is probably one of the best moments for myself. So I'm gonna talk about the bill, House Bill 642, but I'm gonna tell you what was so great about this picture. This is in a hemp field for a lady I met, and her name is Julie. And I've been working with her and some other cannabis people for the longest, but this is here in a hemp farm. What makes this so significant, because one of the first legislations that I was able to contribute to, it wasn't my bill, but I was able to contribute to it, was Senate Bill 57, which legalized hemp in the state of Ohio, which is huge because it didn't make any sense that every state, almost every state, except for Ohio, had legalized hemp a long time ago. So this is a picture from the hemp field. So House Bill 642 is a bill I introduced also this year that will repeal crimes of trafficking and possessions of cannabis. And someone always asks me, why didn't you just go forward with doing adult use? Because the way our laws are set up, you first have to decriminalize something before you can allow there to be adult use. If there's adult use that's put into law, it actually would cross out itself in that process. So again, if you're looking for the bill language for House Bill 642, you would go to ohiohouse.gov and you would click on legislation and click on 642. This bill has been a labor of love. And I would say 641 and 642 were actually a big bill. If anybody knew me probably about a year ago, I had a bill that was literally 1,000 pages. And I've been struggling because I was so in love with the bill, but every time I would show someone the bill, people would be like, this is just too much to read. And I realized for me to actually have any type of real traction, for me to actually have people to have any interest, I had to break it down into multiple bills. So that's where we went from having one big bill to having 641, which is the medical cannabis, adding medical conditions for medical cannabis, and then 642, which is the decriminalization of cannabis. And so I'm going to be reintroducing both of these bills here within the state of Ohio. So Senate Bill 57, which is signed into law, which is the hemp bill, which is from the picture above. It was so vital that this bill was passed. It's such low-hanging fruit, and I just say for our Black men, this is like an easy segue if you want to get a license into the hemp business. It's only $600 to get a license here in the state of Ohio. It's really simple. I don't think you are going to have much overhead. The only thing about it is that you just have to have the land. There's some other restrictions too about it, even when it comes to our inspection process, that becomes a little bit tedious because we are still trying to get our whole process together to actually inspect the product, because this is still a very new program. We've put quite a bit of money in the state of Ohio. We've actually built a whole another segment of our Department of Agriculture to accommodate the hemp program so we can have testing done within a timely manner. We've hired multiple investigators to come out and do the testing of it. And so this is our first harvest we've had just recently. And I've had the opportunity to actually watch on Zoom as multiple hemp farmers harvest this year. So I would love to see more African Americans. I think if I could remember off my list, I think there were probably like 4 out of 197 Black people who actually had a license here within the state, which is crazy because the license cost is so cheap. I'm just really always surprised that we don't have more. So I know that is my next step, is trying to make sure that the amount of licensures represents the people here in Ohio. Part of that barrier is that when this bill was written, that if you have a felony, you cannot get a hemp license, which makes no sense because we need to stop criminalizing plants. And that if people have already paid their time, why are we recriminalizing them by saying they can't get a license for a certain product? And I'm not going to belabor this whole thing with hemp, but hemp is so vital when you talk about making, paper, plastic bags. Like where I live in Cleveland, we actually have a plastic bag ban. So all of our stores have to use paper bags. So it was so vital to me that we legalize hemp within my first General Assembly, because we need to be looking at other manufacturing options. And one of the best ways to do that is also using hemp. Hemp is also good for revitalizing our land and our water. I went to Japan some years ago, and they literally have hemp on a raft, and they were using that as a filtration system for their water. So if you can come up here, I know I'm talking to a lot of smart people, but if one of you guys can come up with a filtration system with hemp, basically it's really simple, and put on a raft and get the patents for it here. I hope you would do that. I legally cannot non-governmental organizations, or it could be governmental, but normally it's non-governmental organizations that come and advocate for a bill. So it's 132 legislators between the Senate and the House. We'll have organizations that will come in and have meetings with all of us the same day. What tends to be the most effective way to do a lobby day is to bring people from somebody's district. I tell you, if someone tells me you're bringing somebody from Cleveland Ward 1, or you're bringing somebody from Warrensville, or bringing somebody from Bedford, or bringing somebody from Orange, I'm personally going to take the meeting. But if you're telling me that it might be so-and-so from Pickering, I'm just throwing a city out there, not because it's Pickering, but if just a random city that's not in my district, I'm less likely to take the meeting, and I'm more likely to have one of my staff to actually take the meeting, because our days are busy. So in between of having session, having committees, we're still having these meetings, and people are still having lobby days. So it's always a good point of interest to try to find people who are connected to that legislator's district. That's always a good point of interest. And have your facts together, like have a one-pager. Don't just come in here talking, and don't assume that we know about your topic, and don't assume that we like your topic. Do your research on every rep, like look at people's voting history, which is so important when you talk about having a lobby day. If you have a person that has a tendency to vote against your topic, know that when walking in the door. I tell people, don't be blindsided when you go to certain of my colleagues and you find out that they're anti-cannabis, but you could know that they're anti-cannabis because they voted against the hemp bill. And so people who tend to vote against hemp bills tend to also be anti-cannabis at the same time. So do your research, and the easiest way to do research on it, call into the office and you can ask their staff, which our staffs are pretty, they'll tell you almost anything if you want them to know. And then also just look on the legislation research. So if you can look at a bill, you can see how all of us voted on a particular bill. So just real quick, I'm just here for questions for everyone. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I hope that was helpful. I know that was a lot. And with everything, I just hope that was helpful. But the biggest key to all of this is that we have to know the process. A lot of people, I realize, just being a legislator, people don't know the process. And so they say like, oh, I want to be in this cannabis field, but they don't know the chair of the health committee. They don't know the chair of the ag committee. They don't know the